a historical fiction novel to add to your reading list that's set at the height of the civil rights movement in the 1960s is In the Face of the Sun by Denny S. Bryce. In the Face of the Sun is a dual timeline novel. It takes readers on an audacious road trip with a pregnant young woman and her brash aunt from Chicago to Los Angeles to confront a decades-old mystery from 1920s Black Hollywood. In the Face of the Sun by Denny S. Bryce is being published by Kensington Books, and it's a historical novel you really don't want to miss. Welcome to The Reader's Couch, a podcast that brings you lively conversations with some of your favourite authors and bookish personalities. Over here, the couch is always booked, but I've moved some books to the side table and fluffed some cushions so I can welcome a guest or two to come lounge with us. Today on the couch, we have Kimberla Lawson Roby, and she's here to talk to me about her latest novel, Sister Friends Forever, a novel that follows 4 lifelong friends as each face a crisis in family, love, and forgiveness. Stay tuned. A historical fiction novel to add to your reading list that's based on the little-known story of America's first nursing school is The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Skinadore. Set in 1880s New York, we meet Una, a young female grifter who's evading the police. Soon, she finds herself conning her way into Bellevue Hospital's training school for nurses. Because of her life on the streets, it has prepared her for the horrors of injury and disease found on the wards. And just as she's finding her footing, a set of murders continues to follow her as she tries to leave the gritty streets of the city behind. And soon, she'll have to choose between self-preservation and exposing her identity in order to save others. The Nurse's Secret brings to light the grisly realities of 19th century medicine, the story of Bellevue Hospital and its training school through the eyes of an intriguing and dynamic heroine. The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Skinadore is being published by Kensington Books, and it's a historical fiction novel you really don't want to miss. Hi readers, welcome again to The Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is a New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and podcast host. She's also published 28 books, but she's here to talk to me about her latest novel, Sister Friends Forever. Please welcome to the couch, Kimberla Lawson Roby. Hey, Kimberla.
Hey, Victoria. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Really excited to have you here on the couch with us. Can't wait to talk about Sister Friends Forever. But before we get into the book, your book will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
I am super excited. And, I think what I've thought about a lot recently is that it really does not matter how many books you've written. You still have that same excitement and, of course, the same fear, hoping that everyone is going to love it. And so, it's just exciting. And it's just a blessing to get another book out there, hopefully that readers will enjoy.
Absolutely. And I was just super excited when I got an early manuscript for this. So I've had the pleasure to read it. I loved it, and I can't wait for readers to get their hands on copies. So be sure to visit your local bookstore, you guys, and pick up a copy.
Yes.
All right. So, Kimberla, I want readers to hear it straight from you. Tell us about your novel, Sister Friends Forever, and what can readers expect when they pick up your book?
So, Sister Friends Forever is a story about four women. All of them have turned 40 years old when the book begins, but they have been best friends since they were small girls who grew up in church together. So they lived on separate sides of town. They didn't go to elementary school, junior high, or high school together, and they even all went to four different colleges. But they kept their friendship intact. They became as close as sisters. And so now they all have made the decision to reside back in their hometown. But their lives couldn't be more different now, even though they have this super strong sisterhood. One of them, Serena, is single. The other, Michelle, is just recently engaged for the very first time. Kenya is happily married, has two children, and Lynette has two beautiful daughters, but is already divorced. So they are living the four different relationship statuses. And so you really get to see some really um, real life issues that are going on with each of them individually. And it shows how they support each other collectively.
Absolutely. So I like the term sister friends. I have sister friends in my life. I think it's very important. I really value those good, solid female friendships.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're extremely important. I can't even find the words. How would you describe or define rather a sister friend, and especially sister friends forever? And what made it so important for you to put this relationship on display in this novel?
So for me, a sister friend forever is someone who isn't necessarily your sister biologically, but she is that sister and friend that you can count on no matter what. It won't matter if it's in the middle of the night. It won't matter if you are experiencing your worst scenario and situation ever. She's going to be there for you. She's not going to be the person who will judge you. She's going to be the person who will listen and who will try to help you through whatever it is you're dealing with. And a lot of times she's the first person who's going to call you, and she's the first person that you're going to call, and you just have a great time together. I have two best friends, my longest friends. The one, we just celebrated 50 years of friendship last year. We became friends at the age of 6 years old in first grade. My other best friend I was introduced to by my best friend that I've been friends with for 50 years. And so she and I have been friends for 35 years. And they are the sisters that I did not have. I have two brothers. And so I grew up as the only girl in the household. And they just continue after all these years to make such a difference in my life.
Absolutely. And that's what I feel with those long term female friends and now sister friends, because I like that term. So they are
Mhm,
sister friends forever. They're the ones you do call in the middle of the night and when you're
mhm,
going through a crisis. And that's what these women are. So the novel centers Serena, Michelle, Kenya, and Lynette.
mhm,
They've been friends since they were small children. But I want us to talk about each of them individually and what's going on in their lives and what are they struggling with the most. Because Serena, let's start with her. She's single.
mhm,
But her biggest question is, why hasn't love found her yet? And
mhm,
I saw her in real life friends that I have. But tell us
mhm.
about Serena and her struggle. And right now, she's really questioning love.
And she is, and even more so now because for such a long time, even though Kenya and Lynette, found husbands, they had these beautiful children, and they had these family lifestyles, that she has always wanted to have. But Michelle wasn't married either, so they sort of stuck together individually as the two of them being friends, and both not having that serious love in their lives and not being married. But now that Michelle is engaged to this wonderful man and is looking forward to getting married, of course, as you know, she has some issues going on as well. But now Serena is really saying, okay, so what's wrong with me? And I think that's the toughest part of all for some single women who have been single for many years, and especially as they move into their 30s and their 40s, they start to wonder what's wrong with them. When am I going to find that perfect person for me? When am I going to get married? When am I going to have a family? And you're saying it a lot. And so, of course, now online dating seems to have become so much more common than ever before. And I'm like you, that's not something I ever really had to focus on or even dive into. I've been married to my husband for 32 years and was married before that for a very short period of time. But yeah, so this is a really different day. But my biggest thing and what my hope for single women is that they will also look to a life of being single, happy, and fulfilled, whether they've met that perfect man or not, or until that actually happens for them.
Right, right, absolutely. And
Mhm,
then there's Michelle.
mhm,
She's now engaged though. So I guess you could say she crossed the hurdle of finding her special person. She's now engaged. She's getting ready to walk down the aisle, sorry. But of course now an old flame comes right back into her life. Now,
mhm.
even though I don't have the experience of the online dating or being single in this time, I can't help but think sometimes when you've moved past a relationship and you're entering into another, something comes up. In this case, it's an old flame. It's someone you've moved past. You're like, okay, this isn't working out. I've actually experienced this. I have girlfriends who experience this. You move past someone and then they just pop out of nowhere at the most inconvenient time,
Mhm.
especially when you're ready to move on. So, this is what Michelle is facing. Tell us about Michelle and now this new conundrum. So, wanting to be married, now engaged, but now there's this old flame.
Yes. So she is a nurse practitioner, very happy with her career, always wanted to take care of elderly people, elderly patients. And so life is good for her. But she finally meets the man of her dreams, who is a very successful cardiologist. And so life is good. But then it isn't long, just, 3 to 4 months, even before the wedding, her only and first love, her true love, the man that she was truly in love with, comes back into her life. And now she has to make the decision of going with her heart and returning to the man that she always loved and never would have left had her parents not told her he wasn't good enough for her in terms of the career that he had, in terms of the money that he didn't make, that her father believed, any man who was interested in his daughter should be earning. And so she's really at a crossroads because she doesn't want to hurt her fiance who truly loves her with all his heart.
Absolutely. And it's quite a conundrum to be in. Readers will have to read to find out what happens next. But then
Mhm.
there's Kenya. Now, she's happily married, at least on the outside. But at the same time, she's also going through this struggle where her husband's ex wife
Mhm.
is still very much involved in their lives, and it's just the family can't find peace, and that can be a real deal breaker for a lot of folks. It's
Mhm.
really hard to deal with. So tell us about Kenya and what's going on in her life and in her marriage as well.
Yeah, so Terry and Robert have a wonderful marriage. They love each other. They just have that kind of connection that most people wish that they could have in their marriage. And so life is great, but his ex-wife Terry has not moved on. But the worst part of it is that she has gone out of her way to turn their 12-year-old son totally against his dad. She wants him to have nothing to do with his dad, nothing to do with his stepmom, nothing to do with his other two siblings. And so that really causes a lot of pain and a lot of tension for Robert, because he does want to be a dad to his son. And so one thing just leads to another. And Terry, the ex wife, she's constantly threatening them in one way or another. And for the most part, the only interest she has is, of course, receiving her child support payments every month. But she also believes that even though the judge has ruled that Robert is allowed and should have visitation rights, she does everything that she can to make sure that Robert never sees his son.
And that in itself is a problem. But
Hmm.
again, we're going to have to read to see what happens to Kenya and her family. And
Hmm.
last in The Sister Friends Forever, because this is a novel that follows four lifelong friends, is Lynette. Now, Lynette's divorced her husband, who was cheating on her, and now she's going back out in the dating world for the first time in a really long time. It's been a decade for her. Again, I said it at the top of this discussion, I've never had to venture back into dating. And a decade's a long time. A lot has changed, dating
Hmm.
10 years
Hmm.
ago to today. So
Hmm.
Lynette, one, having the courage to pursue a divorce because her husband isn't doing right by her, but now she's having to go out in the dating world and it's a struggle. So tell us about Lynette, and what's going on and how she'll have to overcome, the nervousness and the fear and the apprehension with having to date again.
Yeah, so it's very different for her because not only has it been, more than a decade since she's had to sort of be back out on this dating scene, but she's also 40 years old. And so she's being approached not just by men her age, but even men who are quite a bit younger. And so she struggles with the idea of who to date, what to say, what not to say, how far do you go in the dating process? And then more than anything, she's wondering, who can I actually trust? And of course, that stems back to the fact that the man that she loved with everything in her not only betrayed her and had an affair, but also tells her, and by the way, this woman is pregnant. And so I want a divorce and I'm moving on. And at the same time, she's also still trying to be the best mother she can be to their two daughters.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. So Lynette has quite a few hurdles there as well. But again, she has her friends, and I think that's the beautiful thing about this book is that these four lifelong friends are all facing completely different crises, but at least, they have each other to help them navigate what's going on.
Yes.
Um, so I'm really curious, Kimberla, what inspired you to write Sister Friends Forever? What was the spark for this novel to tell a story about four lifelong friends?
I think part of it is because I love the idea of friendship and sisterhood. And of course, that's really where the term sister friends came from for me, is just thinking about the two dynamics. And so I thought, what happens though when you have not just the best of friends, but literally the best of friends who are lifelong friends? They go all the way back to the very early years of their life. And so they've been together through thick and thin, so to speak. They have been there from the beginning to the end. And I just wanted to show the importance of having women friends and sister friends in your life who celebrate you, who support you, who love you, who will shed tears with you, and who will help you in any way that they possibly can. And so I am just a big proponent of sisterhood and the empowerment of women. And so this particular story is very, very near and dear to my heart.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Mhm.
So I really want to get into your writing life a little. How long did it take for you to write Sister Friends Forever? And what was your publishing journey like for this book?
So I started writing the book, and my process actually begins with the idea and the topic. And so I'll write a 2 to 3 page synopsis and submit that to my editor at my publishing house. And, it pretty much talked about what we just talked about in terms of giving the general synopsis of each of the women, how strong their friendship is, so on and so forth. And then I'll start outlining the initial chapters. And I'll usually try to outline 15 or 20 of those, 1 or 2 pages. And then when I'm finished outlining a good first half of the book, I'll go back and I'll start writing a chapter. And so when I'm writing the first draft, I write no less than a chapter every single day. And so, if I'll end up with 40 chapters, then I know that's about anywhere from 40 to 50 days of work, just depending on if I've had to miss a day here and there. But I try my best to stick to writing that first draft every day. I don't schedule outside appointments, doctor's appointments that I don't have to schedule, or ones that I can put off, dental appointments, hair appointments. I really try to stay focused on that first draft. And then from there, of course, then it's time for me to go back and do the rewrites and all of the revisions and the rereading, and just getting the book and the manuscript in the shape that it needs to be for me to submit it. So all tell, probably about 3-4 months total from the conception to the actual submission date, I would say.
Okay, okay, awesome.
Hmm.
And like I mentioned in my intro, you're a New York Times bestselling author. You've published quite a few books. Um,
Hmm.
how was it similar to or different from writing Sister Friends Forever? So, from your writing perspective to even your publishing journey,
Hmm.
was there anything different with this book, or were things mostly similar?
Things were pretty much similar. I think part of the reason that I've been able to write 28 books in the period of time that I have, and in many cases, I was writing 2 books a year for a good while. I would write a normal size novel, and then I would also write a novella. And so coming up with that concept, sketching out this 2 to 3 page synopsis, and then outlining those first 15 to 20 chapters, that has tended to be my process with every single book I've written.
Right, right. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what would you say is the most difficult part of your creative process thus far?
So, I think I don't really struggle with writer's block, but the only reason I think that I don't is because of the outlining. So by the time I'm writing a chapter, I have a pretty good idea. I have that shell, that I'm reading through before I actually write the book. But for me, it's always hoping that every scene I write, readers will enjoy, that they won't have a problem with it, that they won't feel like, wow, I wish this hadn't happened, or you want your readers to just be okay all the way to the end. And of course, you can't satisfy every single reader, that's just logic. But as a writer, you're still hoping to.
Absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. And looking back now, because here you are, 28 books in, you have Sister Friends Forever coming out soon.
Hmm.
Um, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, so maybe going back to the first book or
Hmm.
even before then, what would you tell your younger writing self? What would it be?
I would definitely spend a lot more time learning the craft of writing. I learned a lot over these last, more than 2 decades, because I've had some of the best editors. I've had great editors at every single publishing house that I've been contracted with. But had I learned a lot more about writing, and even if it wasn't taking full semester classes in creative writing, but taking writing workshops, some of the best workshops that go on throughout the summers at various colleges, I would definitely do that if I had it to do over again.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So I know we're here to talk about Sister Friends Forever, and this book is just coming out here, but I'm curious, are you working on any other books, Kimberla? What can you tell us?
Yep. No, I don't have. I'm kind of debating right now. And so my debate is whether I will do another novel that I've sort of been thinking about in terms of the storyline, or if I will do my second nonfiction books. So kind of think about that now for the next couple of months, and then figure out what to do for 2023.
Okay, awesome.
Mhm.
All right, so let's get into your reading life real quick. Again, we're
Mhm.
here to talk about your new book, Sister Friends Forever, but I also want to know what you're reading. So share with our listeners the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Oh my gosh. So, just in this last year, of all the books that I have been reading, and there have been some great ones, but What Passes as Love by Trisha R. Thomas is just a page turner. From the time I picked it up, I never wanted to put down, and it was just such an awesome love story. And you wouldn't expect it to be that, because it's actually a story that centers on slavery times. And so, just the idea that Trisha would be able to create this type of beautiful storyline in that sort of setting says everything about who she is as a writer, and just the talent that she has. And so, yeah, I've been recommending that book to everyone who has been asking me, what are you reading and what do you recommend that I read? So, yeah, that's it. That's the
Yep.
one. Mhm.
What Passes as Love by
Yeah.
Trisha R. Thomas.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So, and what books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead?
Oh gosh, there's just a whole list of them that I have. I have been just ordering different books. Mary Monroe is another favorite author of mine, so I'm really looking forward to actually reading her last couple of books. I've sort of gotten behind. Trice Hickman is another one of my favorites, as well as my book club. I think we've read just about every single book that she has written. She's also a great friend of mine, as well as Trisha, but it's just also awesome to know that, gosh, I almost forget that those are my friends, because when I'm reading, I'm so caught up in their particular storylines. And so, right now, a big focus is on promoting my own book. So once I finish that up, I'll be able to get back to reading.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
So, in addition to loving authors and just books and everything reading, we're big supporters of local indie bookstores. So, I'd love
Mhm.
for you to share with our listeners some of your favorite local bookstores.
Yeah, so two local independent bookstores that I love, and actually they're not local for me, but they're local for others, is the Doc Bookshop. It's a bookstore in Fort Worth, Texas, so that whole Dallas Fort Worth area. Just one of the best stores, one of the most supportive stores of my entire career, and they continue to be that type of store for me even today. And then Mahogany Books, which is in the DC, Maryland area, they have supported me as well. As a matter of fact, both of them, even in the midst of the pandemic, when I released my nonfiction book 2 months before the country shut down entirely, they still hosted these wonderful virtual events for me. And so I am just completely indebted to them, and I support them, and I hope others will too.
I hope they will too. And I love that story because, again, I think bookstores are just more than places that sell books. They're real pillars of the community. They introduce us to some amazing authors, great programming. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Yes.
All right. So getting back to Sister Friends Forever, kind of, tying things together, wrapping things up. I mean, I know you've written the book, you've given it to us. I've read it. I loved it. I can't wait for other readers to meet these four friends. But in a hypothetical world, I guess you could say, what are you hoping readers might think or readers might feel after they've turned the last page on Sister Friends Forever?
My hope is that they will see the importance of friendship, the importance of sisterhood, and that, you know, as women, we have lots of struggles in life. And so my hope is that readers will walk away recognizing that in many cases, as women, as sister friends, we are all we have. And so having that wonderful sister friend in your life and being that wonderful sister friend to another woman can totally change your life for the better.
Absolutely. I couldn't
Mhm.
agree with you more.
Yes.
Kimberla, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to The Reader's Couch. You can find out more about the show and submit your questions for our guest by visiting our website, thereaderscouch.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Couch Is Booked. If you like the show, please subscribe, share, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Next week, I'll be back with new guests, more books, and some fun games we can play. But until then, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.